I could talk for hours about why JRR Tolkien is one of the best writers who has ever lived, and who has ever written in the English language. His prose is just top tier. His language creation is second to none, and his story is just a darn good story about a powerful ring, and the corrupting influence of it as Frodo tries to destroy it. It's really simple, yet it's perfectly profound. But one of the first things that most people talk about when they talk about Tolkien's work is his world building skills. And something that most people mention, and something that was probably the first thing that I noticed when I started reading through the work of Tolkien, is just the sheer amount of poetry and songs that he puts in the book. Each chapter feels like it has like 20 poems in it. Now it thins out a little bit and it doesn't have, it's maybe a bit of an overstatement, but it's just something that I feel like Tolkien delighted in writing. And I'd argue that this alone is one of the reasons why Tolkien is the greatest world builder of all time. Think about this concept in the works of popular literature. If you incorporate songs and tales and poetry, I feel like it ups your world building game, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But think about Harry Potter as maybe the biggest example of the most popular work of fantasy or world building. Other than the occasional song from the Sorting Hat, there really isn't all that much poetry in the entire series. I'm reading Brandon Sanderson right now, and he has nothing in the first few books that I've read from him so far. He might have more as the books go on, but even some older writers like C.S. Lewis, while he actually loved poetry and wanted to be a poet, he doesn't incorporate nearly as much in his prose as J.R.R. Tolkien does. And again, I think this is one of the biggest contributing factors for why he is perhaps the greatest world builder of all time. And in this video, I just want to talk about a few things. It's going to be a bit unorganized in this video, but I want to talk about why I think this actually makes him the greatest, and why one single poem that I came across is maybe the silliest poem in the whole book, but was one of the reasons why I actually think he's the best. And I want to read that and talk about it just a little bit. I'm not going to talk about it crazy. This essay, I was writing it and it went in like 20 different directions. So it's a bit unorganized again, but stay with me. And also just note that it is my first time reading this book. I don't have a comprehensive understanding of Tolkien, but if you want my first time read takes, go check out the channel and subscribe for more of my thoughts as I read through it for the first time. So without further ado, let's talk about the poetry and the songs of J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, when I first started reading, I was actually kind of annoyed with just the amount that was in the text. I am, not the biggest sing-songy person, and I kept coming across these poems and these songs, and it was just like more annoying. But the more I read the text, the more I actually fell in love with these poems. And the more I took this text seriously, the more I actually found these poems were incredibly and a huge part of the entire story. And it contributes to why his world building is so good. Because think about it, what world out there doesn't have songs and poems? What person doesn't find themselves humming a song or whistling to something that they just listened to? Even more so in this culture, who has no speakers and, they can't just pop some music in the local tavern. If they want a song, they need to sing a song to themselves or by themselves. It's not like you can send your kids off to bed and, have them play like, bedtime rhymes or nursery rhymes. I mean, it would probably be amazing to go to like a tavern where they're just all singing, but in a world of fantasy writing, you have to give each distinct people and culture their own art. And if you don't do that, it's going to be hard to make a believable world. And Tolkien obviously does this masterfully in his writing and the songs and poetry that appear in his work. And I talked about this before, but this contributes to like his building of the history of this world. And it makes this world believable because these songs and poems exist. And all of them feel ancient and passed down. And so it gives the world a much older and oral feel to it. And I love some of the poems and songs that Tolkien has incorporated in his writing. I really love The Road Goes Ever On and On that Bilbo sang when he left Hobbiton. I love the song that the three hunters sang of Boromir at his funeral. That one kind of drew me to tears. I actually love, more than anything, the Song of Durin. It is probably my favorite thing that Tolkien has written of all time. I cannot get that out of my head. I think it is by far my favorite piece of poetry or song in this entire story. But I recently came across one on my first time read that it just kind of made me stop dead and made me want to write, again, a highly unorganized essay in my thoughts. It was a poem about Oliphants that Sam recites. And I want to talk about this for a number of reasons. But first, let me read you the poem. Were there any Oliphants? Asked Sam, forgetting his fear in his eagerness for news of strange places. No, no Oliphants. What are Oliphants? Said Gollum. Sam stood up, putting his hands behind his back, as he always did when speaking poetry, and began. Gray as a mouse, big as a house, nose like a snake, I make the earth shake. As I tramp through the grass, trees crack as I pass. With horns in my mouth, I walk in the south, flapping big ears, beyond count of years. I stump round and round, never lie on the ground, not even to die. Oliphant am I, biggest of all, huge, old, and tall. If ever you'd meet me, you wouldn't forget me. If you never do, you won't think I'm true. But old Oliphant am I, and I never lie. That, said Sam when he had finished reciting, that's a rhyme we have in the Shire. Nonsense, maybe, and maybe not. But we have our tales too, and news out of the South, you know. Now, critique. This is the worst thing that JRR Tolkien wrote in this book. But it's also one of the most fascinating poems in the entire book as well, because it's like a basic poem. It's a fireside story written for children of Hobbiton, and it's something that Tolkien felt like he needed to incorporate in this, and I love Sam's approach at this. Again, this poem feels like the most childish thing that Tolkien has ever written in this story so far. This isn't something, again, that you sing to your kids as they're going to bed. It's not really a grand poem about the history and the culture of Oliphants, like maybe the Song of Durin is. But there is a subtle genius and a subtle beauty to this poem that I cannot shake or get out of my head. It's the most basic thing that he wrote, but it has stuck with me throughout the entirety of this week as I've been thinking about this and writing some of these essays. The first reason is because it's so simple. It's almost like clunky how simple this poem is. I could almost see someone taking this story and making it into a children's book with some pictures and just a line on every page. And the child is supposed to lay there excited to figure out what this creature is. But another thing that I love is the way that Sam treats this poem. Even though it's a childish poem, and even though he almost says it's nonsense, he stands, puts his hands behind his back, and recites. This is a tradition for Sam because he knows and respects poetry, no matter how juvenile or childish it is. And this is what had stuck in my head the whole week, that Tolkien is a perfect writer because he writes for children so exceptionally well, that this story is a story for adults that adults are reading and they're enjoying. But all of a sudden he throws this little child poem in there, and it makes it that much more expansive of this world, that even in Hobbiton, they're not forgetting about the children. And even like Sam, who is a grown-up hobbit, doesn't forget about these people. And I think E.B. White is a prime example of someone who wrote an incredible story for children that adults can also enjoy. It's in the Charlotte's Web story, where it's about a pig coming to grasp with the fact that he's dead, but it's also this story about love and life and death and what it means to really value someone and what it means to fear someone, and it's about everything in between. And this book is written in two ways. It's written so that kids can read it and really enjoy it and get something totally different from how adults would actually read it. And when you're writing like that, when you're almost like writing to incorporate two audiences in a book, it is one of the most impressive things that I think anyone has ever done. I find writers who do that to be the greatest writers of all time, which is why I think children's writers are some of the greatest writers of all time, because they incorporate two audiences into their writing. Usually when you're writing, you have to know who your audience is and you cater to your audience to some degree. Tolkien doesn't do that. He caters to his audience to some extent, but then he incorporates things that he's like speaking to 2, 3, 4, 5 different audiences, and they can all enjoy something and get something out of his text that is totally different from each other, which is why this text is just so expansive and interesting. Like if you read it 20 times, you're going to get 20 different things out of what he's saying. And it depends on the point of life that you're in. And think about programs like Sesame Street, how they have a lot of jokes that adults can laugh at while watching with their kids. And the same is true of Bluey, maybe the best show of all time. Not only are the jokes there for adults, but some of these shows also give pretty important themes that adults and parents can talk about with their kids. I can name countless episodes in Bluey that are all about that. And this little poem that Tolkien wrote is so simultaneously simple, but also has some really interesting play on words and really interesting themes here as well. At the end, is he talking about lying down or about honesty? And is this a song that was a reminder for parents to teach their hobbits about honesty and not about lying? What is the real purpose of this poem? And to be honest, I don't really think there is one, but it's just kind of cute and it's a fun poem. And it's just a low-level poem that Tolkien put in there. And it, to me, proves that he knows just how to have fun in his writing. Everything isn't dead serious in Lord of the Rings. He has moments of levity, moments of joy, moments of laughter, moments of severity. It's all over the place, and he incorporates all of these things seamlessly. It's like he's gliding across the words of the page in joy when he's writing this thing. And I think when you do that, to me, you've become a master of writing. If you look like you're enjoying writing when you're doing this. Because something that's interesting that comes later in this passage is that it lightens the heart of Frodo. And this is what the book says. Frodo stood up. He had laughed in the midst of all his cares when Sam trotted out the old fireside rhyme of Oliphaunt. And the laugh had released him from hesitation. I wish we had 1,000 Oliphants with Gandalf on a white one at their head, he said. Then we'd break away into this evil land, perhaps. But we've not. Just our own tired legs, that's all. Well, Smeagol, the third turn may turn the best. I will come with you. Again, this poem, while it's childish, made Frodo laugh in his remembrance of it. And in the midst of him being terrified of making a decision about where they need to go, whether they need to go through the Black Gate or whether they need to follow the way that Gollum has, this seems like a really good balm for Frodo. It's almost something that he's like guided by fate. Sam is sitting there reciting this poem, and all of a sudden Frodo laughs at it, and then it makes him have a clear mind so that he's actually able to make a decision. And this is the power of poetry and song. Especially in the work of JRR Tolkien, it creates more of a realistic version of his world, which makes his world building even better. It also creates a more realistic world because there is a really wide range of poems, from super dramatic, like the Song of Durin, and they're culture spanning. And they talk about the important parts of this entire history, to really childlike poems like this one about Oliphants. His range of poetry just continually proves that he is a genius. And we haven't even talked about Tom Bombadil and his importance and even his poetic prose that he writes in. Maybe when I do my second read, I will go back and kind of analyze that. But go back and read that chapter, and don't read the poetry of Tom. Read the prose of Tom. It's more poetic than anyone else in this whole story. And it just contributes to Tolkien and how he speaks in different languages. And each character has their own distinct way of speaking. It blows my mind. And it also, again, shows the value that poetry has in Middle-earth, that one of the oldest creatures in all of Middle-earth is full of song, and that maybe we should be full of song too. Because poetry and songs can make us contemplate life and bring us to tears, but they can also be really fun. And they can help clear our minds and make a wise decision about something. And I just love that Tolkien didn't seem like a poetry gatekeeper or a snob. He wasn't writing in the super dramatic poetry like a lot of poets do today. He was just having fun with his words. And it was well written, and it was not so well written in some poems. And the ones for serious dwarves, and there are ones for funny hobbit children. And all I know is that some of these poems are all over the place. And, I know this essay didn't really have like a solid thesis, and it was really messy, but I just think this is all just to say I am growing in my love and appreciation for Tolkien. In the very beginning of this journey, I was like so bored by some of the poems and some of the songs that he was incorporating, and now I cannot get enough of them. And now I'm sitting analyzing maybe his worst written one. And it's not even badly written. It's perfectly written, but it's like a child-side tale about these Oliphants. And I just want to sit in this world for longer and longer and just analyze all the little poems and all the little things that he wrote and all the little things that he did. And it's like funny because I just find myself loving this world so much, even through some of the less severe and important things that he did in his work. And so everything that I am reading in Tolkien, there's nothing that right now has made me say like, oh man, that wasn't really well written, or that really wasn't well done. Whenever I read another book now, I'm like critical. I'm like, oh man, they didn't do it as good as Tolkien did. And so maybe I'm becoming like a Tolkien snob now. But holy smokes, is this book just so good. And every page that I turn, I find that I am falling more and more in love with the work of J.R.R. Tolkien. So sorry for how all over the place this essay was. I've apologized for that way too many times. But yeah, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe. If you want, you can become a member. And I'll see you in the next one.